Lent, a period of 40 days marked by reflection, penance, and, according to some stories, the manifestation of evil. Some say that during this time, the gates of hell open more easily, allowing dark entities to roam freely, seeking those who waver in their faith. Many believe Lent is a sacred period, but others claim it is also a time of danger when creatures from beyond become bolder. Across generations, strange and terrifying events have been linked to this season of abstinence and prayer. Ghostly apparitions, supernatural punishments, and cursed encounters plague those who do not respect its sacred traditions. Tonight, we will explore chilling stories about Lent tales that defy logic and will make you question what really happens during these 40 days. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself, because some of these stories might make you think twice before stepping outside during Lent. The Headless Mule, a punishment for sin. One of the most feared legends in Brazil is that of the Headless Mule, but what few know is that this terrifying creature is deeply connected to Lent. According to folklore, a woman who becomes romantically involved with a priest is cursed and transformed into this horrific being, a mule with no head, its neck spewing flames, galloping through the night as a punishment for their forbidden love. It is said that during Lent, this curse becomes stronger. Farmers claim to hear a natural galloping at night, accompanied by eerie neighs that send chills down their spines. Some have even witnessed a fiery silhouette rushing through the fields, leaving behind a scorched path. A man named João, from the countryside of Goiás, once swore he saw the creature up close. He had been drinking late into the night and was walking home when he heard hooves pounding against the dirt road. Expecting to see a horse, he turned around only to come face to face with a headless figure engulfed in flames. The creature let out a deafening shriek before vanishing into the darkness. The next morning, João was found unconscious by the roadside, his clothes partially burned. Was this merely an old folktale, or is there something truly cursed lurking in the shadows of Lent? The Old Woman of Lent. In many regions of Brazil, people fear an entity known as the Old Woman of Lent. It is believed that she appears to those who disrespect the sacred traditions of this period. One of the most chilling stories comes from a small town in Minas Gerais. A woman named Celina never believed in religious customs. She would openly mock those who fasted, ignored church services, and laughed at the idea of abstinence. One night, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, an old woman stood before her, wrapped in a black cloak. Her face was partially hidden, but her sunken eyes were visible, deep and soulless. The woman asked for food, her voice hoarse and unnatural. Celina scoffed.
"I don't believe in these Lent superstitions,"
she muttered, slamming the door shut. Later that night, Celina woke up unable to move. A suffocating weight pressed down on her chest. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Her gaze darted around the dark room until she saw it. In the corner, the old woman stood, her eyes glowing in the shadows. What happened next remains a mystery. The next morning, Celina was found in her rocking chair, staring blankly at the wall. She never spoke another word again. The Procession of the Dead. In certain towns of northeastern Brazil, people whisper about the Procession of the Dead, a spectral parade that only appears during Lent. According to witnesses, if you stay awake late at night, you might hear faint funeral chants drifting through the air. If you dare look outside, you may see them, a line of pale figures dressed in white, each holding a candle. But here's the most terrifying detail: they have no eyes. Only hollow sockets where their eyes should be. A fisherman named Marcos once encountered the procession. He had been out drinking and was walking home alone when he heard the soft sound of feet shuffling behind him. When he turned, he saw them row upon row of eyeless figures, their waxy faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. Paralyzed with fear, he could do nothing but watch as one of the figures stopped in front of him. In a voice that was neither male nor female, the ghostly being whispered, "You shouldn't be here." Marcos ran for his life, but when he got home, something was waiting for him. A candle just like the ones the ghosts carried was sitting on his kitchen table. The next day, tragedy struck. His brother, who had been perfectly healthy, was found dead in his bed. Legend has it that those who witness the procession of the dead will soon experience a great misfortune. The Man in Black. In rural Brazil, there's an old warning passed down through generations: never walk alone after midnight during Lent. Why? because that is when the man in black appears. Described as an unnaturally tall figure wearing a black suit and hat, he is said to roam deserted streets in silence. If you happen to cross his path and make eye contact, something terrible happens. A man named Lucas, from a small town in São Paulo, scoffed at the legend. One night during Lent, after drinking with friends, he decided to walk home alone, ignoring the warnings. As he passed under a street lamp, he saw a figure standing motionless in the distance. Thinking it was just another passerby, Lucas called out,
"Good evening."
The figure slowly lifted its head. Lucas felt his breath hitch because the man had no face, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, featureless skin where a face should have been. The next morning, Lucas was found sitting on a curb, staring blankly into space. He never spoke about what he saw that night. And to this day, he refuses to go outside after dark. The cursed fasting. There is an old belief that breaking religious fasting during Lent can bring bad luck. Some dismiss this as mere superstition, but one chilling story from the 1970s suggests otherwise. In a small rural village, there was a man named Eduardo. He never took Lent seriously and mocked those who observed the traditions. One Friday during Lent, while everyone else in town avoided eating meat, Eduardo decided to cook a large feast of beef and pork, laughing at the idea of fasting. His friends warned him, saying that disrespecting the sacred customs could invite misfortune. Eduardo just scoffed.
"If something bad happens, I'll believe it,"
he joked. That night, as he lay in bed, something strange happened. He awoke to an overwhelming stench like rotting meat. At first, he thought it was just the food from earlier, but then he heard a noise. A slow, wet, dragging sound echoed through his small house. As he sat up, a chill ran down his spine. The shadows in the room seemed to shift, moving unnaturally. Then he saw it. A figure stood in the doorway. Its body was grotesque, covered in decayed flesh, its jaw hanging loose as if dislocated. The creature took a step forward, its feet leaving bloody, raw meat-like imprints on the floor. Eduardo was frozen in terror. The entity let out a horrible gurgling sound, its voice an inhuman mixture of screams and whispers. Then it spoke.
"Feasting when you should have fasted. Now, you will feast no more."
The next morning, Eduardo was found unconscious in his home. His mouth was completely sewn shut with thick, black thread. No one could explain how it happened. The doctors removed the stitches, but from that day forward, Eduardo never spoke again. To this day, the villagers tell his story as a warning. Never mock the traditions of Lent, because something might be watching. The Weeping Shadows. In a small church deep in the Brazilian countryside, there is an unsettling tradition during Lent. Every Friday at midnight, the priest rings the church bell 3 times. Not for mass, not for prayer, but as a warning. Locals say that during Lent, the weeping shadows appear. These are ghostly figures, draped in tattered robes, who roam the streets at night, crying in mournful whispers. Their sobs are soft at first, but as the night deepens, they grow louder, almost unbearable. One year, a man named Tomas, a skeptic, decided to prove that the legend was nothing but nonsense. While others locked their doors and stayed inside, he sat outside his house, waiting. At exactly midnight, the church bells tolled 3 times. Then, the air grew heavy, the temperature dropped, and a strange mist rolled into the streets. That's when Tomas heard its soft weeping, distant at first, then getting closer. A chill ran down his spine as shadowy figures emerged from the fog. They had no faces, just dark, hollow voids where their eyes should have been. Their bodies were covered in shredded garments that seemed to flow like smoke in the night air. Tomas wanted to run, but his body wouldn't move. One of the shadows turned to him and whispered,
"Cry with us."
A cold sensation gripped his chest, and suddenly, his own eyes began to water uncontrollably. Tears poured down his face, but he wasn't just crying, he was weeping in agony, though he felt no sadness. His throat burned as sobs escaped without his control. The next morning, Tomas was found collapsed near the church, his eyes red and swollen. He couldn't explain what happened, but from that day on, he never stopped crying. Doctors found no cause. His tears would dry, but within hours, they would start again. Some say the weeping shadows are the souls of those who broke their Lenten promises, forever doomed to wander in sorrow. So, if you ever hear soft crying outside your window during Lent, whatever you do, don't look. Because once you see them, you might never stop crying either. Lent is meant to be a time of reflection and faith. But for those who have encountered the supernatural, it is also a period of terror. Are these just old folk tales passed down through generations? Or is there something truly sinister lurking in the shadows during this sacred time? Perhaps it's best to follow the traditions, to fast, to pray, to avoid temptations, and to stay indoors after midnight. Because if these stories are true, then darkness walks among us during Lent. And if you're not careful, you might be its next victim. Have you ever heard of any chilling stories about Lent? If so, leave your experiences in the comments if you dare. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. After all, you never know what's watching you.